Because we're the web office.
I think we should update everything to
Nobody uses like Photoshop or anything on campus. Everybody uses GIMP.
what?
GIMP.
Like you said, like, I'm sure my whole semester I didn't take security because I love this week.
Yeah, right.
It's like the best week ever.
I'm really wondering when I signed up for that class.
That's why I don't care about passing it right now.
Well, I've done all the papers. I haven't
Oh, you
started
did?
any of the
Fuck, I
programs.
haven't started anything. I was willing to do it, but I didn't do anything.
Because
I'm gonna
the only
try to
thing I
get
know how to do
programs
is
this
papers.
weekend.
But I feel like the papers, it's just like, because he didn't get to that part, it's just like, oh, teach yourself, read up on everything.
The problem is, I took computer science, so I didn't have to write.
Wait, those papers are doing like 3 weeks.
I know, and that's the only thing that I know how to do, so.
Okay. Maybe you can turn them in and then just say, I'll get the projects in 3 weeks.
I'll get the projects into like a few years,
know I still
when I
pass-
actually
pass
like,
you, you don't
understand how to do that shit.
Well, I'm definitely going to do the papers. I'm going to try to do at least 1 or 2 projects. I know I'm not going to get all of them.
That class.
Yeah, their spring break just made me like
Lazy.
It fucked up my sleep schedule again. You know, I'm just sleeping in every evening, getting up when I should.
Really?
Yeah, I forgot to go to work yesterday. 7:30 in the morning.
Oh my god, that's so early.
That is
I
very
did go to
good.
bed at 4 though.
I'm so glad.
That was smart.
We don't own it.
It was only washing dishes.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like
What's
they
funny
need
is
to
the
wash
guy
it.
that I work with also didn't show us. Like anybody.
That's bad.
I know.
That makes it look worse for you.
I know.
I wonder if this person's gonna show up.
Oh, what would they do? So I guess I'll go and
I'm
talk to the
usually
students.
late.
Yeah, isn't he supposed to actually do that?
I'll do it. Here's this guy. Listen to him. Shut up.
It's actually a guy from Stupid Funny, right?
What?
Stupid Funny.
Oh, there's
Right. Left EA. And
okay.
Can you get online? Yeah, you need to be online if you have a laptop.
This. The web page.
Oh wait, I don't pay for this.
Ask me how
I know my password on this one, I think. Come on.
They need so much to
Turn green.
I think for myself this time. Are you sure? Is that on the schedule?
There's a guy that can take this.
Dr. Kushesh. Do we still have pizza opportunities?
Yes,
after?
indeed.
Oh,
Excellent.
20 minutes. Darwin 20 minutes.
Great.
Yeah. That'll make it work sooner.
Probably not. Huh? It's taking it.
I'll just underline my name there. You have to know it's me. Everyone must know my name.
All right, let's see. What's today's date? Yes, sir.
Okay, don't bother updating. See if I can.
Look, he's just like, oh, title never get to order.
There used to be a
Well, I couldn't figure out
wireless
keyboard.
yeah.
Well, I was so I ran into the lab.
They're obviously still connected up.
Before we had like 101. So
Oh, there they are.
like everyone's just like looking at me.
No, dude, I go into the class and I'm just sitting down. Like he's talking.
Don't see a wireless mouse.
Oh, there's a mouse on there.
Built-in thing. Yeah,
Some people are darlings.
that should put you up.
Shit's
Yeah.
He doesn't even
Are you
say.
going to a extended?
Holy fuck.
Here you go. Yeah. Enjoy your library.
Oh, yeah. I thought you wanted to.
He said that the first one.
Yeah.
I've got my project one running right now. It's been running for like a day and a half.
What?
I'm sorry, I'm not going to run a project.
Well, so the project one is what you do. Like all of these.
Yeah. I mean, it takes forever.
It takes a little. It takes a minute for every time 45 minutes on the actual server. So you have to have a local somewhere. And you can do that. But I had to like put a sticky note up and be like.
Yep, it's on the screen.
There's a handout coming to you. Please pass it around going this way first and then to the other way.
You don't get a certificate.
Here's
Get
the.
Slack.
So what's coming to you is a handout that describes the next talk, next Thursday's talk. As you know, we didn't have a speaker at the time that we did the posters. So this is the speaker for next week. This coming Tuesday at 12 o'clock in Darwin 28, we're going to have two people from industry coming to run a resume writing workshop and kind of give you some hints about how to interview. They come from Sonoma Technology Incorporated, the director of HR, and also one of the chief engineers. So I invite you to come there and to benefit from their expertise. If you haven't done so, please write an email to me indicating whether you will come or not. So if you're interested in coming, please do write an email to me. If you send me your resume, I can forward it to them just so that they can take a look at it and give you pointers. Okay? Please do that. It is my pleasure to introduce Jason Shankel to you today. Jason is always generous with us, and he's been here a number of times in the past, and we truly appreciate him being here again. Here's Jason.
Have the lights down for you guys? Or? There we go. A little easier to see. My name is Jason Shankel. I'm a prototype engineer at the Stupid Fun Club. And the Stupid Fun Club is a creative think tank founded by Sims and Spore developer Will Wright. I've been there for about 2 years after spending about 15 years at Maxis and Electronic Arts with Will. And I am here today to talk about the importance of metaphor in human thought and language and the development of systems for creating the artificial capacity to generate and appreciate metaphors in computers. So this is the second in a series of talks I've been developing for this colloquium based on the notion of reviving some of the old techniques in AI now that computers have scaled and become networked and now that people are more adept at using computers. And in the previous talk, I made the assertion that the kind of the methods in good old-fashioned AI, especially in the natural language development area of good old-fashioned AI, that were kind of ultimately deemed unsuccessful in the 80s are due for a bit of a comeback, thanks to the scaling of computer technology over the last couple of decades. And fundamentally, good old-fashioned AI, just as a quick review of that talk. This talk is going to be much, so that talk established the principle that we should look at these old ideas. This talk is going to talk about some of the things that were missed back then that we can use to enhance the work that was done, the very good work that was done in that period. So the traditional view of artificial intelligence, essentially, is that what you're trying to do is mechanize the process of theorem proving, game playing, natural language processing in inference mapping. These are considered the basic components of intelligence, along with a few other topics, back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And the idea that they had was that we would develop computer systems that would be able to solve mathematical problems, play chess, converse naturally, understand the world, and that it was really just a matter of scaling up the capacities of computers and getting more and more data in there and giving them more and more opportunity to interact and to be taught, that we should be able to arrive at something like the HAL 9000, something that can converse naturally, that can understand the natural world. And we never quite reached that point. Okay? And the argument I made was fundamentally because the nature of intelligence, the kind of intelligence that computers can manifest, is very different from the kind of intelligence that people manifest. And if you think about it, that makes sense. Computers are prosthetic brains. Okay? They are like vehicles or artificial arms or things like that. They are an automated system that is built to carry out intellectual operations, and this is the crucial bit, that human beings are not good at and that are not part of our natural life. Okay, they're things that we can do, but because they are difficult, because playing chess and doing math and proving theorems and being logical is difficult for human beings, we think that anything that can do it must be manifesting superior intelligence or very good intelligence. And we're finding out that that's basically not true. The nature of human intelligence, and if you're interested in this topic, it's online on YouTube. My previous talk was much more in-depth. The nature of human intelligence is different from the nature of computer intelligence. Human intelligence is based fundamentally on storytelling, creative expression, and reasoning by analogy and metaphor. Okay? Human beings, unlike computers, are fundamentally embedded in a world where we are receiving sensory input that we are having to correlate and analyze to create positive social interactions with other human beings, which means that we need to be able to relate to other people, which means we need to be able to model other people. The reason you know who you are, the reason you have an identity, and you say, I'm John, I'm Bill, I've had this experience, I'm Mary, I'm Jane, I've had these experiences, okay? And you look in a mirror and you recognize your face. Nature doesn't produce things for no reason, okay? And understanding your own identity is a biological function that permits you to relate to other people. It's called in psychology projection. We project our own personalities on other people. We assume other people are motivated by the same kinds of things that we're motivated by. And quite often this is fallacious, but it's a very, very good first approximation of what other people are doing. And the way that we relate, not only our psychological projection, but the places where it's broken and flawed and how you don't think like I do, the way that we find these things out is not by logic and reason. We don't sit down and calculate out why our relatives behave the way that they do, or our friends, didn't come to our party, or all those things. We relate it in the forms of stories. We relate it in the form of the Iliad, or the Bible, or Star Wars, or Lord of the Rings, or whatever. We come up with these metaphors to relate human experiences to our understanding of them. Computers don't do that. We don't need computers to do that. Computers don't have to be good at that because we're good at it. Okay? So this talk is about bridging that gap a little bit, because we come to a point where we need computers to be able to relate to humans on a human level more and more. And what I'm going to argue in this talk is that one of the most fundamental things that we have to appreciate in artificial intelligence is the central role of metaphor, not the peripheral role of metaphor in the development of human-related intelligence. Okay. So, we're all pretty familiar from high school and from, literature class with the basic idea of metaphor versus similes. Everybody remember that from the school? A simile is like a metaphor, but a metaphor is a simile, right? We're taught from, that it's a literary kind of a trick, or it's a literary device, or it's a poetic device. And for a long time, linguists, and even, especially computer scientists, but even linguists, even people who are studying human language, thought of metaphor as this kind of weird edge case, this kind of strange thing that people do where what you're saying is not literally what you mean, but the literal meaning can be inferred if you have enough common sense understanding of the poetic elements of a metaphor. So here's a couple of the kinds of metaphors you might, study in a literature class. Further up on the road by Eric Clapton, okay? Further up the road, someone's going to hurt you like me. She's going to hurt you like me. Further up the road, baby, you just wait and see. Okay, now what is he saying here? Are we standing on a road and he's talking to his girlfriend and saying, as we walk down this road at some point, you're going to experience physical pain the way that you inflicted pain on me? Literally? No, right? This is a fundamental metaphor that appears again and again and again, not just in music but in literature and everywhere else, that life is like a road, and love is like a journey down a road. Okay, and the experiences of life are like a road, and the further down you are in the road, the older you are. Okay, that's a basic metaphor. That's one that everybody understands when they hear it. Eric Clapton doesn't have to introduce a lyric here that says, life is just like a road and we're both standing on this road, and you previously, in the past, have hurt me a little bit emotionally, and I'm going to say that took place further back down the road, but further up the road, you're going to encounter the same thing. He doesn't have to explain all that. You get it. Computer would have to explain to it. Again, one of the most famous metaphors in the English language from William Shakespeare, all the world is a stage, and the men and women are merely players. Now, this is a much more direct metaphor. Okay, he's saying, he basically, this might as well be similes. You might as well be saying all the world is like a stage, and the men and women are like players. He's very explicitly saying, I'm making this comparison. It's very active. A computer might have a better chance with this, because we're starting with the world's a stage. Okay? Clapton didn't say, love is a road, but Shakespeare did say the world is a stage. So this metaphor is a little bit easier to grasp, because he's announcing that he's making this analogy rather than expecting you to be able to infer it. Okay? But if I were to just say all men and women are merely players on a stage, you would still get it. You still know what Shakespeare is talking about. So here's another example from the Fish and Pond Blues by Harvey Reid. Okay, now this is a guy who's complaining basically that someone has been fishing in his fishing pond. And all the fish are missing, and when he took out his fishing pole this morning, he found that all the fish were gone. Okay, now has he got a fishing pond and there are no trout left in it? Is that what happened? Okay, or is he the victim of infidelity, of romantic infidelity? It's clear that this is about infidelity. Okay, and this is, and when you hear these songs, blues songs are pretty heavily steeped in metaphor. Some of them are very literal. My baby done left me. Baby's a metaphor, but aside from that, but a lot of them are highly metaphorical. Like, I've been waiting on the train, someone's scratching around my back door, you're nothing but a hound dog. Okay, so misbehaving human beings are like misbehaving animals. A romantic partner is like property. Adultery is like theft. All right, these are the kinds of metaphors that show up in the blues again and again, to the point where we start to see motifs. And one of the motifs in the blues is train. Life is like a train, and the crossroads of a moment in life, a moment of decision, a breakup of a relationship, a change in life, is like waiting at a station. So here are just three songs: Mystery Train, Southbound Train, Bring It On Home, from the Presley and the Allman Brothers, and from Sonny Boy Williamson. And I found literally like a dozen more songs that depict being on a train as transitioning into a relationship, coming back home to my baby on a train, transitioning out of a relationship, getting on that train, never going to see you again. Okay, trains and stations keep showing up. Well, why? Well, because the South is covered with trains and stations, and where blues was developed, the common mode of travel from state to state, especially for somebody who's a blues singer who has to travel a lot, was going to be the train. So these are all the kinds of metaphors that we are familiar with. It's probably you're going to find nothing surprising in any of the ideas that the blues and Shakespeare and rock and poetry and film and all these kinds of things have these explicit metaphors that you were probably taught in English class to look for and identify and create mappings for. And you might be kind of surprised to discover that for all that time that you were spending in English class, in the past, as I said, linguists and especially computer scientists studying natural language considered this entire mode of communication to be some kind of weird, strange, edge-casey thing. And then in reality, what you should be saying here is, I feel that I have been the victim of adultery. I feel that my life partner has not been honest with me. I'm trying to decide to exit the relationship and to give her an opportunity to just be on her own. But ultimately, I feel this compulsion to return back and give it another try, even though I realize I'm setting myself up for a good deal of emotional discomfort. Right? Right? The linguists are saying that's how you should say this. That's the proper way to express this idea. You're making up a bunch of stuff about trains and hound dogs and fishing ponds that has nothing to do with the idea. The purpose of language is to clear communication of facts, and those are the facts of the case, and that's what you should relate as though you were a defense attorney. Okay? And the problem with this is that it's bollocks. It's complete bollocks. And it was identified as bollocks by this man, George Lakoff, who's a linguist who was working at MIT. He currently works at Berkeley. He was working with Noam Chomsky, developing theories of semantics and syntax. And he came up with the theory in the late 70s that, and has been developing it for the last several years, 30 years, 40 years, that human language is fundamentally metaphorical. Metaphor is not a function of human language. It's not a way that human languages can be used. It's that pretty much almost everything we say is metaphorical. We understand the entirety, especially of human society and our social interactions with each other and the abstract concepts that are important to us by means of analogy to easier to understand, grasp, or inherently more understandable concepts. And he wrote, the first book he wrote is, I highly recommend on this, is Metaphors We Live By. This is where he lays out this idea. Okay. And so, for example, I think I have it on the next slide, but one of the most fundamental metaphors in human thought is that up is good and down is bad. Okay. Every human culture, pretty much, I'm sure maybe there's an island nation somewhere that doesn't have this, but pretty much every human culture, even ones where we can't link up their languages together or we don't know when the last time they saw each other, they all have this metaphor. There's no human culture that says down is good and up is bad. Okay? And everything from Native Americans to Africans to Europeans to Asians all have this idea that up is improving, it's higher status, it's better. Well, why? Well, we're evolved chimpanzees. We spend a lot of time up in trees. We know that being up in the tree is better. You can see further to the distance. It's a higher status. It's difficult to get up there if somebody wants to push you down, so it's something you can fight to earn. Down is bad. Like if I throw you out of the tree and you land, you run into the predators, you can't get back up. It's a fundamental physical experience that our pre-lingual ancestors had. So when we developed language, we created this metaphor, and everybody understood it right away. And that's not just one case. There's many, many other cases of this, which I'll lay off in a minute. The other two major books of his to read, Women, Fire, and Dangerous Things. Okay, he talks here much about the common groupings of ideas in different language sets, like women, fire, and dangerous things. There are languages where there's one word for all three of those things. And why are they lumped together in this one category? It's fairly obvious why they might be, right? And in other cultures don't. Like ours, we have different words for these things. For example, how do you say pregnant in Spanish? Anybody know? Embarazada. What does embarrass mean in English? It means humiliated. It doesn't mean pregnant. Well, the root of humiliated means pregnant. Well, why is that? Okay, well, because of the sexual politics of human beings, right? It's a metaphor. The word embarrass in English is a metaphor. Okay, it doesn't literally mean what we say it means. But it's been a metaphor that's been so long translated into our language that we just literally, it doesn't mean the same thing as it does in Spanish. It doesn't mean the same thing as the Latin root. Okay, embarrass means pregnant. It does not mean humiliated. Right? And then the more recent writing, Moral Politics, is an application of the metaphor idea to modern American politics. George Lakoff is a liberal, and he noticed, in the 90s that conservatives were much more effective at getting their political messages out. And of course, anybody could argue whether it's because the message is more valid or this or that, but his argument is that the conservatives in America have identified and understood the fundamental metaphors that the people of America understand and accept. And they've manipulated those metaphors without necessarily actually suggesting policies that serve them well, They've manipulated those metaphors in ways that liberals don't, and that is why conservative messaging, even on issues where conservatives don't have the superior message, their messaging is superior because they understand fundamentally the metaphors that we accept in the political world. And the metaphor he's talking about most fundamentally is that the nation is a family. Okay, so you talk about family values, you talk about sitting around the kitchen table having to balance your budget. The federal monetary system does not work in the form of sitting around your kitchen table balancing your budget because they print money. It's a totally different thing. They have rules that they have to be governed by, but conservatives understand that if you relate the idea that our nation is a family and we have to have fiscal discipline and we have to have good morals and all this kind of stuff, then you can sell policies on that basis. And his argument is that liberals tend to think more in terms of just actually talking about the literal results of this policy or that, and he says if you do that, you tend to lose people's focus because they don't see the metaphorical importance as clearly as they do when conservatives communicate. It's a fascinating book. It's not very. It's making the case that liberals need to step up in their use of language, and it's very interesting. Whether you're conservative or liberal, it's a very interesting book. Okay, so here are some of the everyday metaphors that Lakoff identified that we all use, and to the point where we don't even really think of them as metaphors. We think of them as just definitions of words. Thoughts are buildings. Okay. Her reasoning is unsound. The foundation of her argument is shaky. Her argument cannot stand. All right. I mean, if I say these things, you know what I'm talking about. An idea, a thought, a position, an opinion is a building. Ideas are plants. Okay. Her ideas have come to fruition, and his have died on the vine. Good is up, bad is down. We just discussed. Language is a conduit. Okay. All of her good ideas came to her through him. All right. She gave him every good idea he ever had. Right. Well, you don't give people ideas. Right. You communicate them. But if you are a conduit for ideas, there you go. Your state of being, your emotional state are containers. You fall in love with somebody, but she was happier in her isolation. Okay? Mood is like the weather. He's living under a cloud right now, but things are looking bright in the future. Okay, so these, in metaphors we live by, he lists many of these, and he breaks them down by category: physical metaphors, analogy metaphors, concrete versus abstract metaphors, just all kinds of places throughout language where we use metaphors without being conscious of it. And this is the critical thing that's missing from our approach to natural language processing. When we come to approach natural language processing and we deal with words, with sentences like this, like all of her good ideas came to her through him. Okay. Now I've gone in and I've used like freeling to kind of break this sentences down and to try and create these parse trees. And what ends up happening is that the translation of something like this is always literal. It's like an idea has to be a physical object that actually moves through a conduit. If you have something that says ideas cannot actually be moved, then your system will identify this as a nonsensical statement. Okay, so then you have to. The general approach to this has been to expand the definitions of words to say, well, came to you doesn't have to mean physically. It can also mean, in an abstract way or psychologically. And when you fall in love, you don't fall in love. The phrase "fall in love," I'll just separate that out, and it means gain the experience of love with something. Okay, and I'll just translate it that way. And what natural language research has done to this point has pretty much gone through and tried to just redefine these words, redefine their literal meanings to accept their common metaphorical usage. Okay, and this completely ignores the fundamental problem that needs to be solved. All you're doing is making it a vocabulary problem. So fundamentally, what we want to do instead of trying to redefine words, okay, or trying to pretend that metaphors are not important and all that matters is literal communication, or trying to create some kind of just post-process mapping where if you come up with a literal meaning for something, you go looking up in a dictionary what metaphorical meanings that this might have, and doing it, is that to begin teaching computers to appreciate that when they are encountering language, that they are going to be encountering mappings between different between different sets of concepts, and that human beings freely bounce between different sets of concepts that they've accepted metaphorical mappings for. So, for example, love is a journey. Okay, where our relationship started off really well. We got pretty far, but we know we've dashed up on the rocks right now, and we're, you know, when we're trying to get back on track because, you know, our destination here is matrimony, and I really wanted, you know, this to be the, you know, where our relationship goes. Okay, all of that travel metaphor is natural and you completely understand it. How can a computer understand it? Okay, a computer can understand it by means of comparative semantic networks. Okay, and so the idea here is that more and more of the language knowledge that we're giving to computers is coming in the form of these connected node graph networks where words are related to other words and to other concepts by means of these sort of relational diagrams. And here we have the graphical representation of the notion of love being mapped to a journey. And the fundamental process here that I'm you know, looking to engage in is teaching a computer what the fundamental mappings are that it should be able to recognize, and also teach it the fundamental mappings that it should be able to use. And the value of this is that a computer can spend time dealing with the literal concept, like love. Okay, so if we're going to talk about love, we're going to talk about communication and trust, right, which are two of the fundamental elements of love. And you can say that trust enables love. You know, without trust, it's very difficult to actually have love. And love has the sub-process communication. If you're not in communication, then love is just happening in your head, right? So this is something that happens to, you know, that the process of being in a loving relationship involves communication. And this is something that must exist between two people in order for love to flourish, to grow. Love is a plant. Journey, same thing. A vehicle enables a journey, right? You can walk without, you can walk on a journey without a vehicle, but I guess your shoes are a vehicle. But certainly if you have a car or a train or a plane, that's going to make it easier to get somewhere. And then a journey has the sub-process of literal physical travel. So if you're journeying from here to New York or to London or to Paris or Rome or whatever, that at some point you're going to be physically moving, and you have to have that sub-process, otherwise you're not engaged in the activity of journeying. Okay, so if I create a metaphorical mapping between these two things, and I have a process whereby I can understand that communication relates to the element of travel the same way that love relates to a journey, and trust relates to a vehicle the same way love relates to a journey, then I can very easily navigate between that. I can say that I can say that literally, you know, trust is a necessary precondition for love. Without trust, you can't have love. A computer can understand this, right? Okay. But a computer can now, when it has this mapping, also, as you can see very easily, say, trust is the vehicle that enables the journey of love, right? And all you have to do is make this jumping over across these concepts, and suddenly your language becomes more poetical. The computer's understanding is the same. Okay, its knowledge representation is the same. It still understands this link as a direct link, but it no longer is limited to simply saying, you know, love is a human emotion, right? It is able to find appropriate mappings and make appropriate statements. So this is the beginning of a process for me, a beginning of working on giving computers the capacity to recognize these mappings. And the capacity is motivated by basically two fundamental ideas. One is that we want them to be able to more naturally recognize the use of metaphorical vocabulary without having to provide extended definitions of every single word. Okay, so when I say, you know, trust is a vehicle that enables the journey of love, I don't want to have to go into the dictionary and say that a vehicle can mean a metaphorical vehicle. It can provide, you know, for this process or that process. I just want this mapping. I just want to be able to go into the computer and say love journey, love, you know, organization. An organization is like a plant. You know, that there's corruption at the root of this organization, and it's, you know, it's reaching out to the branches, and we're you know, our mission is dying on the vine because, you know, we're lacking the nutrients to keep our organization alive, right? So I don't have to want to explain all those vocabulary to the computer. Secondly, even more importance to me working in computer games is that the metaphorical mappings that we can give to computers allow us to give them distinctive personalities and more distinctive modes of communication that fit with predetermined characters, right? So if I have a character who's like a goth, very dark, very low, okay, so she's probably going to think in terms, I can give her a set of metaphorical mappings like love is death, like family is prison, you know, like all these kinds of like down little things. And when she speaks about the relationship she has with her family or with her boyfriend or whatever, she'll come up with these metaphors that are kind of down and dark and depressing. It's like we're just waiting, it's like being in a relationship is just like waiting to die or something like that. If I take another character and she's more upbeat and she's more Princess Robot Bubblegum and really excited and happy, right? I might map things like, I might say like love is like a party and all this other stuff, and she'll have different metaphors, even though she's relating the same ideas back and forth. And simply by changing metaphorical mappings, I can give characters a dialect and a worldview that will come out in their communication without them having to change all of their ideas and their concepts. Okay? Because one of the most important things that Lakoff points out is, for example, in the nation is a family metaphor, he creates two strong categories for understanding nation as family. One is called the strict father metaphor. And he says this is the one that conservatives generally absorb. And the strict father is coded male. Okay? And the fundamental concept of the strict father is that the world is a dangerous place, and you have to learn discipline, and you have to pay attention and follow, and obey, so that you will learn how to navigate in a very dangerous world, so that you will have good judgment, so you will make good choices. Okay? And liberals tend to absorb something called the nurturant parent, ungendered role, which says that the world is a place that's filled with opportunity, and the main thing you need to be doing is learning and understanding and experiencing it so that you can grow and become a better person, and a more appreciative person. And it's not entirely fair to lay, one on one group and the other on the other. What he takes a lot of stress to say is that both liberals and conservatives understand both of these mappings. Okay, if you take a liberal and you take them to go see a Rambo movie, they understand it. They understand the moral code that's being presented. They might not agree with it in the real world, but they very well might find it entertaining. It's something that they comprehend. They comprehend the idea that the world is dangerous. They comprehend the idea that that discipline and this kind of thing are important, and obedience are important to navigate. Similarly, you take a conservative, you sit him down in front of Oprah, he's going to understand it. He's going to comprehend the idea that nurturance and helping people to grow makes them into more well-rounded, full people. He might think it's naive to do that in all cases. He might think the world being dangerous makes it impossible, for this lifestyle to just be taken on without thought. But he gets it. And it's also the case that liberals and conservatives have this worldview about different things. Right? So, for example, when it comes to guns, conservatives are nurturing parents, and liberals are strict fathers. Liberals believe that guns are inherently dangerous, that there's no good use for a gun, and that you've got to make sure that they're not around, because they're just there to kill people, and the best thing you can do with a gun is just simply not harm someone. They don't trust guns, they don't trust the gun industry, and they don't trust people owning guns. Okay, so they're strict fathers about that. There's just no room in the classical liberal mindset for that. Conservatives are a nurtured parent about guns. They believe that learning to fire a gun is part of growing up, and it's part of being responsible, and that you should be exposed to something that's that powerful and that deadly, so that you understand that the world is a deadly place. Okay, but I'm going to show you this by means of this very, very compact metaphor, where you can see the force and the power that the world can sometimes manipulate, and that's something I trust you with, as long as I'm there to help you. Okay, so it's not. So the fact of the matter is that these dominant metaphors, okay, that exist in the two mindsets of our political points of view, that cause them to go at each other and say, well, why are you trying to destroy the family? Well, why are you trying to destroy the family? Okay, the mappings exist in both heads, and there are categories of life where they take on each other's personality. And the same thing can happen with computers. Right? We can create metaphorical mappings that dominate one computer, and another set of metaphorical mappings that dominate another. And even though they're talking about the same subject, they will disagree because they don't accept each other's mappings. And that is where we get some really exciting ideas, because we're looking to generate artificial computer non-player characters for games. They can't all just be agreeing on the literal set of facts. Right? If they all just agree on a literal set of facts and all just apply logic, they'll all come up with more or less the same opinions, and the only thing that will ever vary their opinion is the knowledge that they have. And we know that in the real world that's not the way that it works. So I want to show you, I have a few more minutes here, I want to show you how far I've gotten with this so far. I built a little program called Metaphor, okay? And it's based on two core technologies, ConceptNet and SQLite. And this is the URL. It's just a link to the URL to the link, but I'll show you my email address again if you want to send me an email. And I'll also leave this presentation here if anybody wants to take a look at it. It's in straight C. I have it compiling for Visual C++, but there's only like 3 modules, so if you wanted to compile it yourself, it should work. And I have an executable for Windows that you can run, and it's just a little command line operation, and you can hit .help and you'll see how to run it. And basically what this does is it generates some metaphorical, it asks you for some input categories like love and journey or war and hell or things like that, and it produces metaphors by analyzing ConceptNet. Now what is ConceptNet? ConceptNet is a crowdsourced common sense database that has been developed over the last 10, 15 years or so, or maybe even 20. That basically, at this point, just reads through the news kind of daily and churns and gets all these words and ideas and asks people, and then they have all these little input systems that'll put up like 2 words and say, are these 2 words related, or which of these 3 things doesn't belong, or which of these is a category of the other, if any. And they've developed about 250,000 concepts and their relationship to other concepts. So here's a section, this is off of their site, of a semantic graph of cooking and restaurants and eating and desserts and chocolate and baking, and I'm hungry, and all of their relations to each other. So we can see a cake can be located in an oven, it's used for eating, it is a cheesecake is a type of cake, it's also a type of dessert, so it's a cake. People desire dessert, desserts have the property of being sweet, a restaurant is a location where you might find cooking, restaurants are used to satisfy hunger. Okay, so all these concepts exist in ConceptNet, and we create what's called this semantic connection network. Okay, so what Metaphor does is it goes in and you give it a concept and it finds everything around that concept and builds a little local network, and you give it a second concept to map onto. Okay, and it finds all of the connections to that network, and it looks for morphological similarities, and then it sort of spits out these little metaphorical things. And I'll show you some examples of what I've been able to produce with this particular map. Oh, so here are the relations that exist in ConceptNet. Okay. Now, the problem is it's not a fantastic data set for this. It's been useful to help me kind of validate some ideas, but it has a couple of problems. The biggest problem is that it's not normalized grammatically. So, you will have like, you'll ask for a concept like education, and it'll say education is used for learning, right, which is a participle or an infinitive. And it says education might also be used for read book, right? So you don't have it, so literally grammatically it doesn't, because it just depends on how these ideas got introduced to the network and whether people selected one or another. They have not, there's not a normalized grammar. I'm hoping that that's going to be able to, and I'm going to be able to fix that with basically with Freeland, with something that we can be able to go in and recognize, that can recognize ambiguous grammars and say this probably he meant to use an infinitive, and this probably relates to that, and where I'll be able to discern the sentence structure a little better. The other thing is that these a lot of times these relations are kind of abstract, right? And so like conceptually related to can mean almost anything, and so basically if you're conceptually related to a concept that has 4 or 5 words in there, I'm going to have no idea, what this is unless I do some heavy semantic analysis. And also things like defined as, and it's like, it might have something like firefighters defined as, emergency worker. Okay, great. It also might have firefighters defined as a man. Well, not really defined as a man. There are female firefighters, but it's not the fundamental definition of being a firefighter. It's something that fights a fire. I guess a robot firefighter. So you're not always dealing with the strongest data. But here are some of the metaphors I've been able to generate. I cleaned up the grammar a little bit so they'll be readable, but this is basically some of the output I've created. So war is an industry. Right? That's one major metaphor that Lakoff introduces. The idea that we engage in war the way we engage in business or in the production of, or the way we manufacture something. So guys, the industry of war provides the flame fire affluenza of genocide. I'm not entirely sure what that means. Affluenza basically means it's a recently coined term that means typically psychological negative effects of being wealthy. right? And so with the flame flyer after affluence of genocide, that must have come out of someone's editorials. Money can buy love the way that water can reflect beauty. Right. So I have money is a fluid. We're going to say money is water. Right. So money flows this way, money flows that way. Money, my savings have all dried up. I'm saving for a rainy day, whatever. The fluid of money can have substance. Right. So now you start to see these things. They feel a little zen. They feel a little kind of like some of these are a little bit profound. Payment is the rain of the water of money. Right. So like when you're being paid, it's like you're being rained on. Here's the nation as a family. Country is the kin of the national family. Okay, I guess this is interesting. Family is the mom and dad, just the way the nation is a country, right? Okay, so like mom and dad are part of the family the way that the country itself is part of a nation, not just a bunch of counties. Here's love as a journey. Heart is the return home of the travel of love. Now here's where you see the evidence of the grammar not being very normative here. Is the return home. The system has this as a noun. Return home as a noun when it really is a verb. So when I spit this metaphor out, because I'm not doing any analysis on it at this point, I just got that in a noun space. Right? Packing is for travel and irrationality is for love. This is the precondition. This is something you have to have ahead of time. So irrationality is a precondition for love according to this database. And that's something that's another issue with this database, is that these are crowdsourced ideas that people just put in. So if you don't want your robot to think that irrationality is necessarily part of love, you better make sure you understand what's in that database. Here's war is hell. Hell is a fire the way the war is a conflagration. That's conflagration means fire, so you have this case where you have synonyms as well. Writing in the synonyms in a metaphor can be awkward. Combat is the fire of the hell of war. That actually sounds like a real thing. That's something like Winston Churchill might have said, right? Another one is the body is a machine, right? And I like this one I just love. The machine of the body provides the weird of the meat sack. Right. Okay. So as you can see here, this is basically just a first effort at just doing some walking the semantic network and kind of naively accepting the results. And there's a lot to grow on from here. Most fundamentally, we need to begin. What's going on is that the system does not understand the meaning of the metaphors that it's portraying. When we go back over here, there are basically in the code what you'll see is that we have for every metaphor we have what's called a base concept. Okay, the base concept is something like love, which is typically in human experience the base concepts for metaphors are things that are abstract, difficult to understand, complicated, needs some elucidation, not very intuitive. Okay, so even something like love is complicated. Even though it's very intuitive, it's something we all experience. It's also very complicated. And it comes in many different forms, and you're not always sure which form people are talking about, and everyone's experience of it is very different. So it's a messy, weird, strange thing that has no physical presence. Okay, so as humans, we like to take abstract ideas like that, or ambition is another good one. It's like your career ambitions can be. Ambition has a number of different implications. Health, generalized health, is something that has got a lot of different factors. And we map it to something a little simpler, a little more basic, a little more concrete, a little easier to understand, a little easier to relate or to visualize, like a journey. Okay, so when we say an organization is like a plant with roots and branches and can be corrupted and it can be thriving and that kind of stuff, we know what plants. We look around, we see plants. Right? We know what a plant in good health looks like and a plant in bad health. And so that physical, immediate, intuitive understanding of something gives us the ability to reason by analogy to something else that we accept has the same shape. And one of the papers on the ConceptNet site talks very much about the value of reasoning by analogy to come up with some reasonable inferences about things that you don't know about. And one of the examples that they use, it's not metaphorical, but it could be used for metaphors, because one of the things we want metaphors to be able to do is introduce new ideas. Like if I say that an organization is a plant, you might infer that therefore it should have branches. which means it ought to have multiple independent components that are connected to a main trunk, that are all answering back to a central thing. And so if I just give you that mapping as a computer might want to come back and say, do you have, is this the case? Do you have multiple offices that answer to a main office, or multiple people who answer to one person, or something like that, the way that there are multiple branches that answer to a trunk? And this the analogy paper talked about, for example, figuring out that cats have 4 legs, right? By recognizing that the morphology of the semantic network for cat pretty much matches the morphology of the semantic network for dogs. Okay, they're domesticated pets. They're furry. They're small. They live in human homes and things like that. And then in the dog network, it says, and has 4 legs, right? And then you go over to the cat, and it's like, the cat doesn't say how many legs it has. The system is able to ask, does a cat have 4 legs, right? Most pets have 4 legs, so it's able to kind of look at other pets and say, well, a hamster might have 4 legs, and all these other animals have 4 legs. Chickens don't have 4 legs. Right, so it might ask, does a chicken have 4 legs? And you'd have to answer no. Right? And so that's a kind of like question that a child might ask when it's being introduced to a new idea, because human beings understand reasoning by analogy, and metaphors give us the ability to reason by analogy when we've been fed the correct metaphor. If I feed you a different metaphor, if I tell you an organization is not like a plant, it's not this interconnected thing, that an organization is like a team, okay, you will have a whole different set of mappings, and you might have a whole different set of expectations of what interacting with an organization will be like. Okay, so I hope I kind of got across the idea of the importance of this topic, and it's the more that I'm working with this system, the more that I'm finding that fundamentally this is the problem you have to solve first when you're dealing with natural language processing. Is how are you going to inference map between related categories, and which kinds of metaphorical mappings are you going to give your system, not only to recognize, but to use. Okay? And so you want to give your system the ability to recognize metaphorical mappings from all over the place. Right? So just like with George Lakoff's liberals and conservatives, you want to give everybody the strict father mapping, you want to give everybody the nurture and parent mapping as something that they can recognize. But then you want to give your bot a distinctive personality. You want to make sure that it's like, no, this is going to be a liberal bot, so I'm going to give it the nurture and parent mapping. This is going to be a conservative bot. I want to give it the strict father mapping. Those are the mappings it's going to choose to invoke or to acknowledge. And when it accepts the mappings, when it reads the mappings that it doesn't absorb for itself, like when a strict father bot hears a nurture and parent assertion, it can recognize that it disagrees with that without having to analyze the literal words, because it recognizes the mapping and it rejects the mapping. And so it can say, that's just one of your crazy liberal ideas. And the liberal can say, that's just one of your crazy conservative ideas. I want to get bots to the point where they understand the sources of their opinions. And the sources of their opinions cannot just be an analysis of the facts, because that is not how human beings work. Okay, so that's just about it. Here are some references. I really recommend that you guys check this stuff out if you're interested in any kind of artificial intelligence development or in human language processing. First of all, George Lakoff, Metaphors We Live By, William Feinberger's thing is Moral Politics. Lakoff is great for giving you the basic. I just gave you a very brief overview of his point of view, but he breaks these metaphors down into categories and how they're used in human culture. And it's very helpful that he's politically motivated as well, or has become politically motivated in the last couple of decades, so that you have a problem set. He's not a complete ivory tower type. You have a nice problem set that deals with current events and things like that. The other guy, Zoltan Kovacic, I'm recommending just because he has an awesome name. Awesome, Zoltan. Awesome. And Zoltan is also very, very. He's published many books on the use of metaphor in culture and practical introductions to metaphor. He provides a more if you're a computer scientist, he provides a more schematic breakdown for the relationships between metaphors. He goes into more detail than Lakoff does, but he's a little bit less persuasive in terms of like the general applicability. He's just kind of assuming that you pick up this book, so you kind of care about metaphor. So he's making less of a case for the importance, and he's doing more of an analysis of the values. And so I've just made it through practical introduction. I just started these ones. But he's definitely, if you're looking for like how to lay out a metaphorical landscape, it's definitely a guy. And here is my, there. Yep, just me again. And you can grab my email, answer all my emails, and I will leave this list with you guys as well. And that was that. Thank you very much for your time.
Any questions?
Have you thought about the inverse process, if you will, the fact that we are communicating with so quickly and in such short little, 144 characters, that it may be that our own communication may become less metaphorical?
Yeah, not so much less metaphorical as, and as I mentioned in the first talk I gave, when I started off on this topic, that one of the things that has happened since the development of old-fashioned AI techniques is that human beings have become adapted to communicating with computers. Right, so we thought we were going to have to develop these computers that would be like these robot butlers on Caprica who could, just say, would you like your martini now, sir, and all this kind of stuff. And we had the presumption there was that human beings would not ever be able to understand how to work with a machine. Now more and more, like Twitter and these kinds of communications, human beings are learning how to speak like and to computers. That, in my experience here, doesn't make our language less metaphorical. It changes the metaphors. Right, and so, for example, LOL is almost always a lie. Right, very rarely when people say LOL did they literally laugh out loud. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they do. It's not always a lie. But we all know what LOL means. It's a metaphor for I am amused.
I would suggest that we're actually going to new metaphors based on our relationship with computers. But I actually think we're going to rely on them even more. Because if you notice his demonstration, a metaphor is a much shorter way of speaking.
Yes.
It's about a bigger idea. So I think we're going to amp it up.
Yeah. And the other thing that's happening is that we're also developing so, for example, with the blues, do I have like 2 more minutes here? Okay. So the blues, as I said, and I listened for this talk. I listened to a lot of blues. I had a depressing week last week. I listened to a lot of blues because I kind of wanted to use the blues as a basis for this. And one of the things I found is that the blues is actually the lyrics kind of move fairly fluidly between being highly literal, where the metaphors are basic metaphors like she dumped me, and she dumped me is a metaphor, but it's not. It's a commonly understood metaphor that it's just part of the common definition of dump. Is that. And then there's other ones like, there's a hound dog scratching around my fishing pole and I can't find my, tobacco bag or whatever. And you're like, well, I'm pretty sure this is about adultery, but I'm not clear exactly what. Is that one of the things you found was that in the history of the blues was a very dangerous art form because you're dealing with a population that was living under oppression, living under violence, well past the Civil War, that had to be able to communicate with itself in such a way so as to not terrify the dominant culture, which was basically prepared to lynch at any time, right? And so a lot of the metaphors that they developed were a way of also relating secret communications, right? So they would write songs that sound like they're about adultery, but they're actually really about local law enforcement oppression, okay, and things like that. And so one of the things that everybody who's listening kind of knows what that means, unless you're an outsider, in which case you just accept it as a song about adultery, or maybe literally just a song about a fish pond. And I think that online is doing the same kind of thing as well, which is that we're starting to create a common global culture where we understand the meanings of certain metaphors, like LOL, right, and how they're used, and that it's almost like we have a global secret language that's forming that everyone understands. And I think one of the places we can look to right now for how that kind of communication is being utilized is the Middle East. We have all of this upheaval now in the Middle East that's very unique in the history of the Middle East, which is this grassroots overthrowings of these regimes. Well, they're all communicating with each other on Twitter and on Facebook, and that's what's different now than from the 80s and the 70s when there were similar kinds of tensions. So I'd be very interested in looking at what kind of language are they using, what kind of metaphors are being used in those communications to signal that this is really about a protest overthrow. This is not about something about the Quran or something about our local market or anything else like that. This is really about this kind of revolution. So revolutions tend to create their own metaphorical language. Thank you very much.
Just a reminder, there's pizza in Darwin 28, and Jason is going to be there, so you can continue your discussions and questions.
No, I didn't. You can always check if it's lost and found. I'm not sure where it is. Okay. Yeah, I think it's downstairs, yeah. Yeah, sure. So you're videoing your lectures?
We do, yes, and we put it online for people to watch.
How does that work? I mean, do you do everything like it?
I think so, yes. Yes, like we do this in our sense of arrangements with them.
Yeah. I think it'd be good for if they do, if they actually do. Yeah, yeah. Okay, you're Okay, right now we're working in this quadrant, the rival, non-excludable, and there's different ways that we can handle the analysis. One is through the tragedy of the commons idea. And that is what the video was about. And not only the idea of the tragedy of the commons, but we also use, right, this analysis of game theory. So the question on the exam about this topic is like essay. And you have to make appropriate references to the idea of the tragedy of the commons. Why is it a tragedy? What do we mean by the commons? What would be a modern day definition? And then how do we connect it to the idea of game theory? So what was the basic idea in game theory? Well, the study guide says, what's the key implication of game theory? Not explain what game theory is, but what is the key sort of lesson that we learn from game theory? And remember, this is, you have to talk in this terms of game theory in reference to, that claim by Adam Smith, right? So, anybody want to take a stab at it? You're going to have to do this on the exam, which is in, 2 weeks?
I have something that says that if we are greedy, we actually are helping society and bettering others. But in Nashville, he says that when we're greedy, we're actually hurting everyone, including ourselves.
Yeah, so and that's what we learned. That was what we learned from game theory. Game theory is telling us how, even when we know better, we act in our self-interest, even when we know we actually shouldn't be. So even when we act in our own self-interest, society does not benefit, right? Smith said, it's okay. People can act in their own self-interest. Society benefits. Nash is saying, game theory is saying, yeah, sometimes that's okay, what Mr. Smith said, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes people if you act in your own self-interest, society does not benefit. Okay. And so, has anybody seen the movie? So in the scene, you'll see Nash is trying to convince his buddies to cooperate. But you have to figure out what are they doing in the movie. Now, interesting, just on the drive to campus, news item, the Obama administration has released some guidelines, right? They're not laws. They're not going to enforce these. But they're guidelines, and the hope is that the junk food industry will self-impose these guidelines, right? So we're not talking about writing laws. It's just saying, here's some guidelines for you junk food producer companies in reference to advertising their junk food to kids. Okay. Because 1/3 of all kids, right, obese. This is a national sort of health issue. Other people are objecting, right? These are guidelines. He's saying this is what we hope you do just because you believe this is the right thing to do. We're not going to make laws and restrict advertising like tobacco, right? There's a whole bunch of laws about advertising tobacco to kids. There's laws about it. Can't do it. Okay. They're saying we're not going to make